the circulatory as well as the respiratory system. We will discuss these two systems together as they are highly related. This is because the exchange and circulation of gases, such as oxygen and carbon dioxide, are related to each other. Specialized structures such as the lung or gills will help to mediate gas exchange between an organism and its environment. Networks of highly branched vessels will help to maximize exchange surface area. This will then travel to a pump, which is typically a heart. This will drive the flow of fluid to the rest of the body. Wide and thick-walled vessels will help to enable circulation of highly oxygenated blood throughout the body. It will also take waste materials such as carbon dioxide to eliminate it out from the respiratory surface. This allows for gas exchange to occur at the body tissue. As we've seen with the digestive system, unicellular organisms can simply exchange materials between themselves and the environment through diffusion. This means that small molecules and gases, such as carbon dioxide and oxygen, can simply undergo diffusion. This will result in a net movement across those cell plasma membranes. However, diffusion is a very slow process and is also very efficient over large distances. As a result, there are two major adaptations that help to favor efficient gas exchange in smaller organisms. One involves having a simple body plan. By having a simple body plan, this ensures that each cell that makes up that organism can exchange material with its environment. Another major adaptation is that a circulatory system will help to minimize diffusion distance. This will allow for efficient exchange with the organism, the environment, and the body tissues. When we examine the digestive system of simpler animals, we explore the gastrovascular cavity. A gastrovascular cavity is present in hydras, jellyfish, and other cnidarians. It's responsible for distributing substances through the body and also facilitates the exchange of gases as well as cellular waste material. This is because fluid will bathe the internal as well as outer tissue layers of the organism. However, only the cells that are lining the cavity have direct access to nutrients. As a result, these organisms are typically very thin. Many times they are only 2 cell layers thick. This means that nutrients can diffuse to reach all body cells. Both the jellyfish and the flatworm, as seen in the pictures to the right, have branched gastrovascular cavities. This means that portions of the gastrovascular cavity will extend throughout the body. This will facilitate exchange of materials. In general, circulatory systems can be classified as open or closed. However, both of these have 3 main components: the fluid, vessels, as well as a pump. In an open circulatory system, the fluid is considered the hemolymph. This is also considered to be the interstitial fluid that bathes the body cells. Heart contractions will pump this hemolymph into vessels that then lead to open sinuses. Once the hemolymph reaches the open sinuses, this is where nutrients, gas, and waste will be exchanged with the body cells. When the heart relaxes, fluid will be drawn back in through the pores that will eventually close as the heart contracts. This will help to increase the pressure to allow for the hemolymph to be pumped throughout the body. Body movements will also aid in the distribution of hemolymph. An open circulatory system is present in insects, some mollusks, as well as crustaceans. A closed circulatory system consists of blood as the main fluid. It is important to note that blood is considered to be separate from interstitial fluid that actually bathes the body cells. In a closed circulatory system, 1 or more hearts will be used to pump blood into the vessels that branch throughout the body. These vessels will eventually penetrate into the organs and tissues to ensure that the blood reaches all body cells. Gas, nutrients, as well as waste material are exchanged between the blood and the interstitial fluid that bathes the cells. Closed circulatory systems are present in annelids, cephalopods, as well as vertebrates. This diagram highlights the difference between open and closed circulatory systems. Note the presence of a heart in both. Also note the presence of hemolymph in an open circulatory system, while blood and interstitial fluid is kept separate in a closed circulatory system. In general, open circulatory systems have low hydrostatic pressure, and as a result, they typically require less energy to maintain. However, closed systems allow for higher pressure values. This increase in blood pressure is important to allow for more efficient gas exchange and also to allow for more efficient nutrient delivery in large and highly active animals. We're now going to take a look at the circulatory system in vertebrates. Circulatory system in vertebrates is typically referred to as a cardiovascular system. This is because the blood will circulate to and from the heart using an extensive network of vessels. In general, there are three main types of blood vessels present in vertebrates: arteries, capillaries, and veins. Arteries are important in carrying blood away from the heart. Arteries can then branch into arterioles within the tissues. Capillaries are very small vessels that may form capillary beds that infiltrates into the tissues. Veins will carry blood towards the heart. Veins begin with venules that collect blood from the capillary beds. These venules then typically drain into main veins to then be carried back to the heart. Vertebrates have closed circulatory systems. However, they can further be classified depending on the number of circuits that are present. In a single circuit or single circulation circulatory system, there will be a two-chambered heart present. This two-chambered heart will pump blood to a respiratory surface such as gills for gas exchange before the blood will then travel to the rest of the body. This type of system is present in sharks, rays, and bony fishes. In general, single circulatory or circulation systems have very low blood pressure once the blood leaves the gills. This will impose a limit on the amount of systemic blood flow. In a double circulation system, animals will have two circuits of blood flow. One will involve the gas exchange surface to allow for the blood to become oxygenated, and the other circuit is responsible for distributing the blood to the rest of the body tissues. We call this the systemic circuit, and it's typically the blood that exits out the left side of the heart, while the gas exchange is termed the pulmonary circuit. This typically leaves from the right side of the heart. Double circulation systems are present in amphibians, reptiles, as well as mammals. In general, double systems will have to repressurize the blood before it is pumped to the body. This will provide for vigorous blood flow and a high blood pressure so that the blood can easily flow to both the brain as well as body tissues. Some vertebrates can be intermittent breathers, and they may go for extended periods without gas exchange, or they may have the ability to use another surface for gas exchange, like the skin or integument. Frogs and amphibians, for example, have a three-chambered heart that consists of two atria as well as one ventricle. However, within the ventricle, there exists a ridge that can help divert oxygen-rich blood to the systemic circuit and oxygen-poor blood to the pulmocutaneous circuit, though this ridge is not considered to be a complete division for the ventricle. When the animal is submerged, blood flow can also be directed to the skin as a primary surface for gas exchange. This is highly advantageous, as when the animal is submerged, the lungs are essentially ineffective. Turtles, snakes, and lizards also have a three-chambered heart with one ventricle. However, their ventricle contains an incomplete septum that does divide it into right and left chambers, though not completely. The ventricles lead to two aortas that help divert blood into the systemic circuit. Blood flow to the lungs and to the rest of the body can be controlled to withstand periods of intermittent breathing. Crocodilians, on the other hand, have full four-chambered hearts with two atria and two ventricles. This occurs because the ventricles contain a complete septum that divides them into two. Arteries that carry blood from the heart can join to both the pulmonary and systemic circuits. In addition, arterial valves help control the blood flow to the lungs and the body to also help withstand periods of intermittent breathing. Thus, there are many adaptations that can be present to allow for animals to be highly adapted to their environment and to maximize their gas exchange between themselves and the environment. Birds and mammals also have a four-chambered heart. In general, the right side of the heart will receive the oxygen-poor blood from the entire body. It will then pump it into the lungs for gas exchange to become oxygenated. The left side of the heart is responsible for receiving the oxygen-rich blood and then pumping it out to the rest of the body. As endotherms, this is important to ensure that oxygen-rich blood is pumped quickly to body tissues to meet the higher oxygen demands of being an endotherm, and also to ensure that carbon dioxide does not build up in body tissues and is removed quickly. Also note that the design of a four-chambered heart reflects convergent evolution. This is because this design arose multiple times in different ancestral lineages. We're now going to take a look at the general pattern of blood flow in the mammalian heart. We will begin with the contraction of the right ventricle. Once the right ventricle contracts, deoxygenated blood will be delivered to the lungs via the pulmonary arteries. Blood will then enter into the lungs and into the lung capillaries and eventually reach the alveoli, which is considered the site of gas exchange. At the alveoli level, oxygen will be picked up by the tissues and carbon dioxide will be released. This highly oxygenated blood will then return to the lungs via the pulmonary veins. It will then enter into the left side, specifically the left atrium of the heart. Blood will then enter into the left ventricle. Once the ventricle contracts, this highly oxygenated blood will leave the ventricle through the main aorta and be delivered to the rest of the body. Arteries will branch into arterioles, which will then feed into capillary beds at the site of organs and tissues. This is the site of gas exchange at the tissue level. Blood will then leave the capillary beds and will be deoxygenated. This means it will be very low in oxygen, but it will also be high in carbon dioxide. The blood will then collect into venules and eventually into veins. Veins are responsible for collecting the deoxygenated blood from the body. It will then return it to the heart via the right atrium. It will do so through the superior as well as inferior vena cava. Deoxygenated blood will then enter into the ventricle and the cycle will begin again. The flow of blood is maintained in the heart through the use of valves. These valves are important in preventing any backward flow of blood within the heart. AV valves, or atrioventricular valves, are located between the atrium and ventricle, while semilunar valves, or SV valves, are located between the ventricles and the major arteries leaving the heart, specifically the aorta as well as pulmonary artery. This diagram depicts the major blood vessels and the major chambers of the heart. Also note that blue denotes deoxygenated blood while red denotes oxygenated blood. Use this diagram to help trace the path of blood flow within the heart. We're now going to take a look at how the heart contracts. Systole refers to the contraction of the heart, while diastole refers to relaxation. During the relaxation phase, blood will flow into both the atria as well as the ventricles. When the atria contract, blood will in general be forced to the bottom of the heart into the ventricles. During ventricular contraction, the blood will then be pumped out of the heart, either to the pulmonary artery if it is coming from the right ventricle, or to the rest of the body if it is coming from the left ventricle. The lub-dub sound of a typical heartbeat are actually due to the closing of the AV followed by the SV valve, or atrioventricular followed by the semilunar valves. Heart murmurs will result if there is a defect in any of the valves. If any of these valves are defective, they will allow for blood to flow backward through the heart. The heart rhythm, or the synchronous contraction of the heart muscle, must be regulated. The heart itself contains a group of cells that are autorhythmic, which means that they set the pace of the heart contraction. They can contract on their own without any stimulation from the nervous system. These cells reside in the sinoatrial or SA node, which is located in the wall of the right atrium, close to the superior vena cava. There are also cells located in the atrioventricular AV node. This is located in the wall between the two atria. The SA cells help to act as a pacemaker for the heart, establishing the rhythm for the contraction, while the AV cells will relay the impulse to the rest of the heart to help synchronize the contractions. Purkinje fibers will extend from the AV node into the apex of the heart and will then branch into the ventricular walls. This extensive branching of these nerve fibers are important in ensuring that the signals for contraction spread quickly so that all of the muscles within the cardiac tissue can contract at the same time. Electrocardiograms, also known as ECGs or EKGs, are important tests that measure the electrical activity of the heart. They do so by placing electrodes or sensors on the skin. When there are electrical impulses from the SA or AV nodes, this current will then also travel through body fluids. This will eventually reach the skin tissue, which can then be detected by the electrodes. In general, the sympathetic nervous system can help to speed up the heart rate, while the parasympathetic nervous system can help slow it down. These nervous systems are important in regulating the heart. Note the image below to see what cells are involved in what part of the heartbeat. We begin with the signals starting from the SA node. These will then spread to the atria to cause atrial contraction. These will then follow and be spread to the Purkinje fibers, which will then help to ensure consistent and synchronous ventricle contraction. We are now going to examine the structure and function of blood vessels. Blood vessels will have a central cavity that we call the lumen. This lumen will then be surrounded by smooth endothelium, smooth muscle, as well as connective tissue. However, these layers will differ in arteries, veins, and capillaries that will reflect their specific adaptations for their functions. Arteries in general have very thick walls. They will also have many elastic fibers and collagen fibers to provide strength as well as provide flexibility. Arteries can withstand the high level of blood pressure that is being pumped from the heart. Smooth muscle layers can both dilate and constrict to help modulate or moderate blood flow. In general, veins have much thinner walls than arteries do. Veins will contain valves that help to maintain unidirectional blood flow, despite the fact that there is very low blood pressure in the veins. Smooth muscle layers can also dilate and constrict in veins to help moderate blood flow. Capillaries will consist of simply endothelium surrounded by the basal lamina. Capillaries have a very small diameter that helps to allow for red blood cells to pass through in a single file manner. This will help maximize the gas exchange between red blood cells and the surrounding tissues. In this diagram, note the structural differences between the different types of vessels, arteries, veins, as well as capillaries. In general, blood will flow from arteries that will then branch into arterioles. These arterioles will then extensively branch to form capillary beds that are typically embedded within the tissues or organs. After the blood flows through these capillary beds, they will then be collected in venules that will then collect in the veins. Veins are responsible for returning the blood back to the heart. It is important that proper blood pressure is maintained to ensure that the blood flows properly to all body tissues, and to also ensure that the blood can flow back to the heart so that it can then become reoxygenated. Heart contractions, in general, generate very high pressure values. This will help force blood into the arteries as well as into the body tissues. This is typically termed as systolic pressure. However, some of this force is exerted horizontally, which helps direct the blood flow away from the heart. Relaxation of the artery walls after the blood flows also helps to ensure that the blood maintains its flow in one direction. This also helps to maintain blood pressure. This is referred to as diastolic pressure, or the pressure that results from the relaxation of the blood vessel walls. Due to the small diameter in arterioles as well as capillaries, this creates a large amount of resistance. This leads to the drastic reduction in blood pressure that you can see from the diagram or chart here. As a result, the veins will receive very low pressure blood. So one must ask, how does this blood actually return to the heart if it exists at such a low pressure? First, we're going to take a look at how the blood flows in capillary beds. Capillary beds have precapillary sphincters. These sphincters will open and close to help regulate the blood flow into the capillary beds themselves. Within a capillary bed, there will also be a thoroughfare channel. These thoroughfare channels remain open at all times and allow for blood to constantly flow between the arterioles as well as the venules. Hormones and chemicals will help to aid in regulating this blood flow by causing the opening or closing of these sphincters to allow for more or less blood to flow through. Many capillary beds are present in tissues to ensure that all cells in the body are nourished. As the blood flows through these capillaries, exchange will occur through diffusion, through pores, endocytosis, as well as exocytosis. When the blood moves through the capillary beds, it does so in a typical single-file nature. Blood proteins and cells will remain in the capillaries. This creates osmotic pressure as water will move into the capillaries due to the difference in solute concentrations from the blood and the surrounding environment. Fluid will exchange between capillaries and the interstitial fluid. In general, blood pressure will always exceed the osmotic pressure. This will help to cause a net movement of material out of the capillary and into the surrounding area. Within capillary beds, there is also the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is important in helping to recover fluid, proteins, as well as cell fragments from the interstitial fluid. If you remember, the lymphatic system also helps deliver lipids from the small intestine into the bloodstream. There is an extensive network of lymph vessels that exists within the tissues. This will collect fluid from the surrounding area, which will then help to form lymph. The lymphatic system, or vessels within the lymphatic system, have valves as well as rhythmic contractions to help prevent backflow of the lymph fluid. Lymph will circulate within the lymphatic system and will then get filtered through the lymph nodes before it empties into the veins at the base of the neck. We now go back to our question. If there is such low blood pressure in the veins, how does the blood return back to the heart? There are three main adaptations that are present that help to ensure that the blood will return back to the heart. Veins will have valves that help to control the direction of blood flow. This means that once the blood passes through and enters into part of the vein, then the valve will close to prevent backflow. This will then ensure that there is unidirectional blood flow back to the heart. In addition, there are rhythmic contractions that occur in the smooth muscle layers of the vessels. The smooth muscle that exists in the venules as well as the veins will help to contract to increase the movement of blood in the veins. In addition, skeletal muscle contractions can also help pump the blood back